At an altitude of 4,600 meters, the two planes collided at speeds of 420 knots and 320 knots respectively. The right wing of the F-4 fighter hit the front of the passenger plane at an inclined angle, causing the cockpit to separate from the front and rear of the cabin. The cockpit crashed near the Duluth Peak. The cabin crashed in a nearby canyon. Hello everyone, I am Exploration Channels. Welcome to subscribe to my channel. On June 6, 1971, an F-4 fighter was preparing for takeoff at the base. It entered service in 1964. Tail number 151,458. The F-4 fighter first flew in 1958. It has a very good maximum speed and decent maneuverability. Its wing shape is somewhat unique. From a distance, it seems that it is very small, but in fact its fuselage is very tall. It is still in service in some countries. The fighter has two seats. The pilot sits in the front and the observer sits in the back. They originally planned to conduct cross-regional operations flight. There were two aircraft on the mission. However, when the aircraft No. 151,458 was about to land at the three Air Force bases, it also had multiple faults, including transponder failure, radio failure, oxygen leakage failure, and radar function weakening. No. 151,458 was separated from the other aircraft and left at the three bases for repair. However, this base could only repair the damaged radio. As for other faults, they could only be repaired after returning to the base headquarters. The transponder failure would cause the air traffic control to be unable to pass the secondary radar monitoring the aircraft. Only the traditional primary radar can be used for monitoring. The difference between them is that the primary radar can identify any reflected wave. The disadvantage is that the accuracy is not high. A bird or even a cloud may be mistaken for an airplane, and the range is small. The secondary radar will receive continuous signals. The accuracy is very high. The transponder is used to transmit flight speed, altitude and other signals. Most airports have both types of radar, therefore, at a closer distance. The air traffic control should also be able to see the damaged aircraft. The aircraft also has an oxygen leakage fault, so the aircraft must fly at a low altitude. The oxygen leakage here means that there is no oxygen in the oxygen mask, but there is still cabin pressure in the aircraft, so it can still rise to a certain height. The aircraft came to the front base with the fault again, and prepared to return to the headquarters base for repair after refueling. Because of the fault of the aircraft, the pilot can only fly visually, supplemented by air traffic control and instruments. Therefore, in the case of visual flight, the aircraft cannot fly into the clouds, and cannot be too far away from the visible ground. The aircraft was originally supposed to take off at 2 p.m., but there was an air show at the headquarters base, so it was delayed for more than 3 hours. At 5:16 p.m., this F-4 fighter took off from the fallen base. In order to avoid mountains and clouds, the plane quickly climbed to an altitude of 4,700 meters. While cruising, the pilot decided to change the original planned route and detour through Palm Valley because it could avoid the congested traffic over Los Angeles International Airport. However, the crew did not report to the Civil Aviation Control Center. In addition to the original fault of the aircraft, the Air Traffic Control Bureau may not have discovered the performance at all, which laid the hidden danger for the accident. At the same time, at Los Angeles International Airport, more than 100 kilometers away, Houston Northwest Airlines Flight 706 was preparing for takeoff. Flight 706, the flight's destination is Seattle. It will stop at several cities. It will first go to Salt Lake City. The weather that day is foggy. The visibility is for 8 kilometers. At 6:02 p.m., the plane is carrying 44 passengers and 5 crew members. It takes off from Los Angeles International Airport. Because planes at that time did not turn upside down, they need the air traffic control to guide them step by step on which direction to fly and which signal frequency to switch to. There is no air collision avoidance system installed on the plane because these are technologies that will appear in more than 10 years. The passenger plane is now executing autopilot. Therefore, it is not restricted by altitude and visibility. At 6:06 p.m., the passenger plane was handed over to Los Angeles Air Traffic Control. The plane was at an altitude of 3,600 meters and would continue to climb. The plane was flying at 320 knots. The F-4 fighter on the other side was flying at an altitude of 4,700 meters and a speed of 420 knots. The fighter pilot made an amazing move and rotated the plane 360 degrees. In fact, this was to see if there were any other aircraft nearby. There was still 1 minute and 20 seconds before the accident. The observer in the back seat was checking the radar panel to see if there were any other aircraft nearby. However, because the aircraft's radar was damaged and had not been repaired, he did not see any aircraft. When he looked up again, he suddenly saw a passenger plane flying at high speed from the right. The observer in the back seat quickly reminded the pilot, and the pilot quickly made adjustments. However, at 6:11 p.m. at an altitude of 4,600 meters, the two planes flew at 420 knots respectively. The right wing of the F-4 fighter hit the front of the passenger plane at an oblique angle, causing the cockpit to separate from the front and rear of the cabin at an altitude of 4,600 meters. The two planes collided at speeds of 420 knots and 320 knots respectively. The right wing of the F-4 fighter hit the front of the passenger plane at an oblique angle, causing the cockpit to separate from the front and rear of the cabin. The cockpit crashed near the peak of Breeze Mountain. The cabin crashed in a nearby canyon. the F-4 fighter code-named 151458 crashed 1.6 kilometers away from the wreckage of the passenger plane. The observer in the back seat successfully ejected and escaped from the plane. But the pilot was unfortunately killed. After a year of investigation, the official concluded that the cause of the accident was quite complicated, and that it was a combination of multiple coincidences that led to this tragedy. They interviewed all the controllers in the regional control center at the time. They did not see there were other planes near Flight 706, so the possible reason was that the F-4's transponder malfunctioned. In addition, the fighter's fuselage was relatively small, so it was not scanned by the radar. However, since there was no monitoring, we don't know whether the air traffic controllers actually saw the light of the F-4. In addition, regarding the failure of the fighter pilot to eject, subsequent investigations found that the pilot could actually escape, but because the early F-4 ejection seat design had flaws. If the seat at the rear of the cockpit ejected first, the ejection seat in front would get stuck. This problem had actually been discovered long ago. The headquarters had originally planned to upgrade the ejection seats of all F-4 fighters in July. Unfortunately, this accident happened in June, with only a month's difference. Another point is about the visual observation of the pilots on both sides. In fact, later investigations found that there was a gap between the cockpit glass and the glass of the passenger plane. The distance between the two planes is what we commonly call the A-pillar. The F-4, coming from the left side, was blocked by the A-pillar. The pilot of the F-4 may have been checking the instrument, so he did not see the passenger plane flying at 320 knots in front of him. The two planes were too close to each other at the time of the accident, so the pilot had no time to react. Also, because of the failure of the F-4's INDA, if the air traffic control could see it, it should be able to give the two sides a larger distance, because under normal circumstances, even once, the radar can still track the aircraft. The investigation team gave a number of suggestions, one of which was that all air traffic control centers must be equipped with monitors and microphones, so that the communication between the air traffic control and the aircraft can be retrieved. In addition, the military will try to avoid civil airways and connect to the civil aviation control system. May all the victims rest in peace. Well, today's story ends here. See you next time.